Welcome to the Darkling Radio, your home for terrifying true-style horror stories told in an immersive first-person voice. Each tale drags you deep into the darkness with chilling detail, haunting atmosphere, and twists you'll never see coming. If you love late-night scares, eerie mysteries, and horror that feels disturbingly real, you're in the right place. Clara Hensley thought the night drive through the countryside would be peaceful, a quiet escape after a long day. But as the miles dragged on and the road grew emptier, she began to notice small details that didn't make sense. The same broken sign reappearing, the same twisted tree leaning over the asphalt. What started as a calm journey soon twisted into something far more disturbing. As Clara realized, she might not be the only one traveling that endless stretch of road. The night stretched before me like an endless tunnel, the kind of black that swallowed everything in its path. My headlights barely carved through it, illuminating only the cracked road and the occasional branch jutting out from the shoulder. The steering wheel felt slick beneath my hands, a mix of sweat and tension that I couldn't seem to shake. I told myself it was just another late drive home, nothing more. But deep down there was something wrong with the air, something that pressed down on me with every passing mile. The silence outside wasn't natural. I could hear the engine hum and the tires grinding against the asphalt, but beyond that, there was nothing. No insects buzzing, no wind pushing through the trees, no animals stirring in the brush. It was as though the night itself had frozen, holding its breath. I tried to comfort myself by watching the numbers on the dashboard, a ritual that usually calmed me. The odometer ticked along, steady and reassuring. But when I looked at the clock, my heart gave a strange lurch. It hadn't moved. The glowing digits showed the exact same time they had when I first pulled out onto the road. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe the clock had broken, maybe the wiring was off, maybe I hadn't noticed it before. But the more I thought about it, the tighter my chest became. I gripped the wheel and forced myself to focus on the pavement. The road twisted and wound through stretches of forest that looked darker than ink. The trees leaned in from both sides, their branches stretching like bony arms. My lights caught glimpses of their bark, pale and stripped in places, almost like scars. Every curve brought with it the fear of what might be waiting just out of sight, crouched in the shadows. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time meant nothing here. My eyes strained against the gloom, and that was when I saw it. Something darted across the road ahead. At first I thought it might be a deer, but the way it moved stopped me cold. It wasn't smooth or fluid, it was jerky, its limbs snapping at angles that made my stomach knot. My headlights brushed against it, just for a heartbeat, but that was enough. Its skin looked pale, stretched tight across its frame, and its posture was bent unnaturally low, as though it were crawling even while upright. I slammed the brakes, tires screeching on the asphalt. My car jerked violently and I sat frozen, scanning the road. The figure was gone. My pulse pounded in my ears as I checked the mirrors, desperate for another glimpse, but the stretch behind me was empty. I let out a shaky breath, convincing myself it must have been an animal. My nerves were frayed, that was all. But as I pressed the accelerator and the car rolled forward again, I couldn't shake the unease crawling beneath my skin. The dashboard glowed in the corner of my vision, taunting me with its frozen clock. I reached down and tapped it, hoping maybe the jolt would bring it back to life, but the time stayed still, unchanged. The gas gauge caught my eye next, and what I saw made my mouth go dry. I had been driving for what felt like over an hour, yet the needle hadn't moved at all. The tank was as full as it had been when I started. No fuel burned, no distance covered. My throat tightened as a sick thought wormed into my head. What if I hadn't gone anywhere at all? What if I had been circling the same stretch of road over and over? I shook my head violently, trying to clear it. I needed to focus. I needed to stay calm. My palms left damp prints on the wheel, and every muscle in my arms ached from holding it too tightly. Outside, the forest pressed closer, darker than ever, the trees swallowing what little my headlights revealed. Something flickered at the edge of my vision. I whipped my head toward the passenger side window, but there was only the blur of branches rushing past. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to convince myself it was nothing, but a single gnawing thought sank its teeth deeper into my mind. I wasn't alone out here. Something was watching me. I stared harder into the rearview mirror, searching the back seat, and for a fleeting second I thought I saw movement. Just a twitch, a shift in the shadows. My heart skipped as I blinked, but the seat was empty. My own reflection stared back at me, pale and tight-jawed, eyes wide with fear I could no longer mask. I turned back to the road, pushing the car faster, desperate to leave whatever this was behind me. But no matter how far I drove, the clock on the dashboard never changed, and the forest never ended. And somewhere deep in my chest I knew the figure I had seen on the road wasn't gone. It was waiting for me, watching, hidden just beyond the reach of the headlights, ready to step back into view. The road kept winding forward, but no matter how far I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been here before. The trees leaned in with their skeletal branches. The cracks in the asphalt lined up in the same broken patterns, and the air felt heavier with each mile. At first, I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. The night was playing tricks, and exhaustion was twisting the details into loops. But when I spotted the same bent guardrail, the one I had noticed earlier, my stomach dropped. I pressed harder on the gas, desperate to push past the dread, but the road kept delivering me back to where I had already been. A torn billboard loomed on the right, its peeling paint curling like old skin. Ivy clung to its base, swallowing half of the words. I remembered seeing it earlier, down to the jagged tear running across the middle. My chest tightened. I kept driving, hoping for a sign of something different, anything to break the cycle. But minutes later, the exact same billboard came into view again. The same bent metal, the same ivy, the same faded image of a smiling face, too weathered to recognize. I wanted to pull over, to stop and think, but fear pinned me to the wheel. Stopping felt dangerous. If I stopped, I might never move again. So I kept pushing forward, even as my mind whispered that I was trapped. Then I saw it. Up ahead, the faint flicker of hazard lights pulsed weakly in the dark. My heart leaped with relief. Another car, another person, proof that I wasn't alone in this endless void. I slowed as I approached, my headlights sweeping over the vehicle. It was parked on the shoulder, tilted slightly toward the ditch as if abandoned in a hurry. The closer I got, the more my relief twisted into unease. The car was the same make as mine, the same color. My breath caught in my throat when I noticed the dent in the rear bumper, the exact same dent I had put there months ago in a parking lot. The details lined up too perfectly. My headlights lit the interior, and that was when the world seemed to tilt sideways. Someone was inside. Someone sitting behind the wheel. My eyes locked onto the figure, and my stomach knotted until it felt like I couldn't breathe. It was me. Every detail was exact: the same jacket, the same hair, even the same air freshener dangling from the rearview mirror. The only difference was that this version of me wasn't moving. It sat perfectly still, hands on the wheel, face pale and expressionless, staring straight ahead as though frozen in time. Panic surged through me. I slammed the accelerator and sped past, my eyes refusing to linger another second. The car blurred into the darkness behind me, swallowed by the trees, but the image stayed burned into my mind. My grip on the steering wheel ached, and sweat soaked through the back of my shirt. I wanted to believe I had imagined it, that fatigue had warped reality, but every nerve in my body screamed the truth. That was me in the other car. Somehow, impossibly, I had driven past myself. The road stretched out again, endless and unchanging, but the dread wouldn't let go. I checked the mirrors constantly, heart hammering at the possibility of seeing the other car tailing me. Each glance only showed the road falling into blackness behind me. Until it didn't, I blinked, my vision swimming. For the briefest second, I saw something in the back seat, a shape hunched low, motionless. My breath caught, and my chest burned as I tried not to turn around. Slowly, carefully, I shifted my eyes to the rearview mirror, and there it was, me, sitting in the back seat, my face blank, my eyes locked on mine, watching with the same expressionless stare I had seen in the parked car. The steering wheel shook in my hands as the car veered toward the shoulder. I jerked it back, forcing the vehicle straight, but when I looked again, the back seat was empty. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst, and my breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. The road stretched ahead, but I no longer trusted it. I didn't know if I was driving forward or circling back into myself. All I knew was that I wasn't alone in the car anymore. Even if I couldn't see it, something was there with me, waiting in the shadows of the back seat, patient and silent. My hands trembled against the wheel, every muscle in my arms tense as I tried to keep the car steady. The memory of my own face staring back at me from the back seat clung to me like ice, a presence I couldn't shake even though the seat was empty now. The air inside the car felt thicker, like it was being pressed down by something unseen. I rolled the window down to breathe, hoping the cool night air might clear my head, but the silence outside made it worse. There was no wind, no rustling leaves, no sound of life at all. The world beyond the headlights was void, as though I was driving through a place that wasn't alive anymore. I reached for my phone, desperate to hear a familiar voice. But when I pressed the button, the screen glowed faintly and froze. It was fully charged, yet the display was locked in place, showing the time I had left home. I tapped it, shook it, even restarted it, but nothing changed. The glowing numbers didn't move. They sat frozen in perfect stillness, mocking me. My stomach twisted. It wasn't just the car, it wasn't just the road. Even my phone had been caught in this strange suspension, as if everything had been severed from the flow of time. My eyes flicked back to the forest pressing in on either side. The headlights strained against the wall of darkness, but sometimes, between the trees, I thought I saw shapes. At first they seemed like trunks or shadows, but the more I stared, the more they looked like figures standing just at the edge of the road, unmoving, watching. Their outlines vanished when I blinked, but every time I opened my eyes again, more of them seemed to appear closer than before. I forced myself to look forward, but my pulse quickened as I realized I was gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles were turning white. Then the radio clicked on by itself. My heart skipped as static hissed through the speakers, sharp and piercing in the silence. I hadn't touched the dial. My hand hovered near it, shaking. But before I could shut it off, the static broke into faint whispers. I strained to catch the words, but they weren't words I recognized. They were murmurs layered over each other, soft at first, then rising into a frantic tangle of voices. The sound filled the car, wrapping around me until I felt trapped in their urgency. I twisted the dial back and forth, desperate to silence it, but the voices wouldn't stop. They grew sharper, angrier, overlapping in a language I couldn't understand. My chest rose and fell in quick, shallow bursts, sweat sliding down my temples as the noise drilled into my skull. I wanted to pull over, to get out, to run, but something inside me whispered that leaving the car would be worse, that if I stepped out into the darkness, those shapes in the trees would finally move. Suddenly, the voices stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before, pressing down against my eardrums until I felt dizzy. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other still clutching the useless dial, frozen in place. For a moment, I thought the nightmare had ended. Then, through the static's last faint crackle, I heard a single sound. A whisper, clear and sharp, sliding out of the speakers like a blade through the dark. It spoke my name. Every hair on my body rose. I slammed my hand against the power button, but the radio didn't shut off. The glowing numbers on the dial flickered and warped, reshaping themselves into symbols I didn't recognize. My name repeated again, drawn out this time, stretched and distorted until it sounded like a voice coming from just behind me rather than through the speakers. My head turned before I could stop it. My eyes darted to the back seat, but it was empty again, just the shadows, shifting faintly in the corners. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, but the faint smell of something unfamiliar lingered in the air now, metallic and sweet, like blood left too long in the open. My grip on the wheel tightened as I pushed harder on the gas. The car roared forward, but the road didn't change. No towns, no intersections, no exits, only the same black stretch repeating endlessly. The dashboard clock still hadn't moved, neither had the gas gauge. I wasn't going anywhere, yet the miles stretched endlessly beneath me. In the corner of my vision, the passenger side window reflected the dim glow of the dashboard. My breath froze when I saw it. A face hovered there in the glass, faint and warped by the angle, but unmistakably my own. Its mouth was open wider than possible, frozen in a scream I couldn't hear. When I blinked, it vanished, leaving only the empty reflection of the road. The whispers didn't return, but the silence was worse now, thick and suffocating. I could still feel the echo of my name hanging in the air, like someone had carved it into the night itself. And deep in my chest, I knew they weren't finished with me yet. I pressed the gas pedal harder, desperate to outrun whatever had claimed the night. The trees seemed to blur, bending inward like a tunnel designed to trap me. My headlights flickered once, and for the briefest second, the world outside collapsed into pitch black. My chest seized as I slammed both hands tighter on the wheel, bracing for impact, but then the lights blinked back to life. When they did, the road was different. The trees were gone. What stretched before me now was lined with tall skeletal telephone poles. They leaned crookedly as though they had been standing too long, wires dangling loose, some sparking faintly against the void sky. The pavement itself looked wrong, rippled and uneven, as if it had been melted and hardened again, frozen mid-flow. My car jolted over the warped surface, each bump rattling my bones. I stared out the window, trying to make sense of where I was, but there was nothing beyond the poles. No forest, no fields, no stars, just blackness swallowing everything past the edge of the road. My stomach churned. It felt like I was no longer driving through a place at all, but through something else entirely. Then, up ahead, I saw it, a faint glow against the dark. A gas station stood in the distance, its neon sign flickering weakly, a sliver of color against the endless black. Relief surged through me. Finally, something familiar, something human. I pressed forward, wheels grinding against the warped asphalt until I pulled into the gravel lot. The building looked like it hadn't seen life in years. The pumps were rusted, hoses coiled limply like dead snakes. The windows of the station store were cracked, dust clinging thick to the glass. Yet the fluorescent lights inside flickered on and off, humming faintly as though barely clinging to existence. My car engine idled, its low rumble echoing far too loudly in the emptiness. I hesitated before stepping out, but the silence inside the car was unbearable. Gravel crunched under my shoes as I made my way toward the station, each step heavy with dread. The air felt different here, denser, electric, humming faintly in my ears. I reached the door, my hands trembling as I wiped away the thick film of dust coating the glass. What I saw in the reflection made my breath stop cold. It was me, but not me. The face in the glass was older, gaunter, its skin sagging slightly, its eyes sunken and hollow. It moved when I did, but slower, delayed, like a puppet reacting too late to its strings. My chest tightened as the reflection's lips curled upward, forming a smile I didn't make. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the curb. My heart hammered violently as I turned toward my car, desperate to escape. The headlights glared back at me, too bright, almost blinding against the dark. Something was wrong with their angle. It took me a second to understand why. They were pointed upward, as though the car wasn't empty anymore. I staggered forward, hands shaking as I grabbed for the driver's side handle. But when I yanked the door open, the breath left my body in an instant. The seat wasn't empty. I was already sitting there, both hands resting on the wheel. This version of me turned its head slowly, locking eyes with mine. The smile it wore was small, but it was enough to make my skin crawl. It wasn't a smile of relief or recognition, it was patient, knowing, like it had been waiting for me to catch up. My knees threatened to give out. I stumbled back, gravel crunching underfoot, but I couldn't tear my gaze away from the figure inside my car. Its face stayed calm, but its eyes seemed to shine with something dark, something I didn't recognize as my own. The fluorescent lights inside the gas station began to flicker more violently, buzzing louder with each pulse. The air vibrated with a low hum that set my teeth on edge. I glanced back toward the cracked windows, and the reflection was still there, rolled hollow, grinning wide now, wider than should be possible. When I looked back at my car, the version of me in the driver's seat was no longer sitting still. Its hand was slowly lifting, palm pressing against the inside of the window, as though beckoning me closer. The air around me grew thick, heavy, pulling at my lungs with each breath. The hum of the station grew louder, almost unbearable. My heart pounded so violently it felt like it might tear through my chest. I backed further into the dark lot, but the glow from the headlights followed, blinding me, pinning me in place, and then the engine roared to life on its own. The sound cut through the silence, sharp and final, as though signaling that whatever was in the car wasn't waiting anymore. It was ready. The engine's roar filled the empty night, so loud it felt like it was vibrating through my bones. I froze, my feet rooted in the gravel as the headlights glared directly into me, bleaching the world in harsh white. My chest heaved, every breath sharp and shallow, and I knew with a certainty that if I stood here any longer, I would never leave. I forced my legs to move, stumbling backward toward the shadows at the edge of the lot, but the car shifted into gear, tires crunching against the gravel, rolling toward me without hesitation. I turned and ran, though I had nowhere to go. The gas station was swallowed by blackness on all sides, no other roads, no landmarks, nothing but an endless void stretching into infinity. My footsteps echoed unnaturally loud, like I was running inside a hollow shell of the world. Behind me, the car's engine growled, gaining speed, the gravel spitting from its tires. I sprinted past the broken pumps and toward the side of the building, my heart hammering so violently it felt like my ribs might snap. My lungs screamed for air, but the void seemed to eat every breath. I pressed my back against the cracked wall, gasping, trying to make myself invisible in the shadows. For a moment, all I could hear was the pounding in my ears. Then the car stopped. The engine idled softly, humming like a predator waiting to pounce. The headlights washed across the corner of the building, glowing brighter and brighter until they felt like they were burning my skin. I shut my eyes tight, clenching my fists to keep them from trembling, but I could feel it. Whatever was in that car wasn't just watching me, it was studying me, the way something studies prey. When I finally dared to open my eyes, the light was gone. The engine had gone silent. My breath caught in my throat. I leaned out from the corner, peering into the lot, and the space where my car had been was empty. The silence pressed even heavier now, suffocating in its weight. I stepped back into the open lot, eyes darting in every direction. My car had vanished completely, swallowed into the void. My knees threatened to give out as I staggered toward the middle of the gravel, turning in frantic circles. Nothing but the gas station stood there, flickering weakly against the dark. Then I heard it, the sound of a door shutting. The crack of metal echoed through the air, sharp and final. It came from behind me. I spun around, but there was no car. Only the station, its lights buzzing faintly. The silence returned, thicker than before, and I realized the sound hadn't echoed across the lot. It had come from closer, much closer. From the car door of a vehicle that wasn't there. I backed away slowly, my pulse stuttering as dread spread through every nerve. The air felt charged now, humming faintly like static. Each step I took echoed too loudly, as if the space itself were mocking me. Then, in the reflection of the station's glass window, I saw it. My car was there, parked right behind me, its headlights off, its body warped faintly as though it didn't belong in this place. My throat closed as I turned. The car was real, solid, sitting in the lot exactly where I had been standing moments before. The driver's side door was open, its interior light casting a sickly yellow glow, and in the seat sat another version of me. It turned its head slowly, meeting my eyes. The grin it wore stretched wider, its face warping into something I couldn't accept as my own. Its skin looked wrong, too loose, sagging in places, its eyes glowing faintly with something dark. My knees buckled and I stumbled back, but the figure raised one hand and reached toward the passenger door, pushing it open. The door creaked wide and the air shifted, pulling at me like an unseen force. The car waited, patient, its interior light flickering as though urging me closer. I fought to move away, but my legs felt heavy, sluggish, as if the gravel itself clung to my shoes. My breaths came in panicked gasps, my chest burning. I turned to run, but the void pressed in from all sides. No matter how far I moved, the gas station and the car stayed in place, always directly behind me when I glanced over my shoulder. I knew then that I wasn't leaving. The road hadn't been taking me anywhere. It had been leading me here. The sound of the engine starting again split the air, though I wasn't inside. The headlights clicked on, and the beams cut straight through me. I raised my hands to shield my face, but the light seared through my skin, burning deeper until it felt like it was inside me. My body convulsed. My lungs seized, and the last thing I saw before the world dissolved was the figure of myself behind the wheel, smiling with teeth that weren't mine. Everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was sitting in the driver's seat, my hands rested calmly on the wheel. The dashboard glowed softly, the clock still frozen at the same time it had been when I left home. The gas gauge hadn't moved. In the rearview mirror, I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. Another me sat in the back seat, pale and silent, watching with hollow eyes. And deep in the pit of my stomach, I knew this would never end.